Glasgow is critical, and I think everyone has recognised this juncture that we're at. This is the moment where, it will be make or break for those ambitions that we've set around 1.5 degrees, and we know what falling short of 1.5 degrees means for the rest of the world, for ourselves, for our region. And so that's why we need to maintain that ambition and push so hard at this event. The world needs those who are out there holding us to account. This is not just about, as I say, set a target and walk away and hope for the best. Those activists are seeking to see those tangible changes. Now, I stand by what we have done though. We have had a steep incline because, just like many other countries around the world, for a number of decades, targets were set but investment and changes were not made to align with them to help us achieve them. So in a very short space of time, we've firstly, in our last term, set the architecture we need in New Zealand, establishing everything from the Zero Carbon Act, embedding that 1.5 degree target, the Climate Commission, establishing those mechanisms that mean, regardless of who is in power in the future, there are now accountabilities that will be set through Parliament that means that you won't see New Zealand easily able to walk away from what we must do. We were the first country in the world to pass a law that will mandate disclosure from financial institutions around climate risk. We are the first country in the world that's entered into this partnership within our agricultural sector that I hope will demonstrate a pathway for other countries as well. So there's a lot to do, but there are areas where I do believe we can be very proud of our activity. It is important that regardless of whether I'm physically present there, that New Zealand is part of the discussion and the debate, and that we are continuing to push for collective ambition and demonstrating that ambition ourselves. For us, it is in our backyard, and it does make it immediate. I think the thing that we need to keep pushing on, though, of course, is that there's never any excuse not to contribute and do your bit. Some may say that New Zealand's contribution to global emissions, is relatively small, but how can we stand on the world stage and call for actions by others unless we commit ourselves? We've made a very steep increase in our commitment, and it is a steep increase. We want to reduce via our NDCs emissions by 50% over the next 10 years. That will take a lot of domestic action, and it will take a significant commitment on behalf of New Zealand and New Zealanders. We have to make sure that, yes, we have planning in place, that we future-proof ourselves as much as possible, but we don't allow that to become a backstop, a first measure rather than a backstop measure. Our Pacific Island neighbours want to see us still driving hard towards 1.5 degrees rather than simply start planning for a future that is not in their homeland, that it leads to perhaps the loss of culture and language and all of those things that are incredibly important for them to protect. So many of the things that are actually contributing to our emissions profile at the moment are things that at a day-to-day level, New Zealanders may not notice as much, but switching the way that we are producing goods in New Zealand, manufacturing goods in New Zealand, will make a significant difference. Let's talk about transport, because we know that is a big contributor to New Zealand's emissions profile. One of the challenges that we have is, of course, for most countries, switching up to public transport is something that is already well ingrained in many large city centres. New Zealand, of course, not everywhere is public transport going to make that difference, but where it can, we've invested an extra 40% into our public transport network. But we know that we are a country that is dominated by private vehicle use. So in those places where we can switch up to give options, we will and we are. But in the rest of the country, that's where the clean car standard and those EV incentives are just so important. Even there you can see the significant difference that those alone are estimated to make. So for Kiwis in 10 years' time, my hope is that they will see more affordable EVs, that they'll see a second-hand market for those low emissions vehicles that make it more affordable, and that they have more public transport options. We are in fact the only country in the world that's made a commitment to price and reduce agricultural emissions. So you can see that we do take that principle and that philosophy, but for me, it's not just about this idea of polluter pay, but polluter incentivised to change, because that has to be the goal of climate action, is to see a reduction, not just a payment.